In this regard, Malaysia notes that follows with keen interest the discussions in the ALCO Forum focusing on current developments in the United Nations Conference on Sustainable Development and other related fora, such as the United Nations Framework Convention on Climate Change negotiations. Notwithstanding the need for a sustained discussion on the wider scope of the environment and sustainable development, Malaysia seeks to digress from this general focus and steer discussions to the fundamentals of environmental protection from the. In this regard, it is our ardent hope that ALCO's debate on environmental issues may also address practical approaches towards the enhancement of legal frameworks and law enforcement measures on the environment. Recently, the Attorney General's Chambers of Malaysia has embarked on a study focusing on the domestic enforcement of environmental crimes, primarily against wildlife. Malaysia has since established a dedicated team within the Chambers itself to handle the prosecution of all protected wildlife under the Malaysian Wildlife Conservation Act of 2010 and forestry matters. The team, working closely with legal advisors at the ministerial and state levels, are studying the adequacy of penalties and the effectiveness of the provisions provided in environmental laws and will make proposals on any required legislative amendments. An online database system on environmental crimes will also be developed to capture the statistics of all environmental crimes in Malaysia. Reports on the breaches of environmental laws will be fed into the system by both the federal and state-level legal advisors and law enforcement agencies. Malaysia is also looking at the viability of having a specific statute on environmental crimes, forging closer cooperation among the various enforcement agencies, and promoting joint enforcement operations, training for enforcement officers on investigation and prosecution of environmental offences, and programs to enhance public awareness, including judicial officers, on the importance of conservation and sustainability of forests, protection of the wildlife and environment. Malaysia believes that initiatives at the domestic level will lay the foundation for future regional and global legal cooperation to combat environmental crimes, which have increasingly transcended national borders. Malaysia therefore looks forward to any initial reactions from ALCO member states and the ALCO Secretariat to Malaysia's proposal to venture into this particular area of discussion. Madam President and distinguished delegates, Malaysia looks forward to deliberations by ALCO member states on the topic of challenges in combating corruption, the role of the United Nations Convention Against Corruption, and in that connection welcomes the conclusion of the 4th sessions of the UNCAC Implementation Review Group on the 31st of May 2013. Malaysia has had a positive feedback from the reviewing experts from Kenya on the Malaysia's review process that was conducted in February 2013. The positive feedback received relates to, among others, Malaysia's initiative in establishing various supervisory committees to oversee the implementation of the Malaysian Anti-Corruption Commission Act of 2009 as a means to foster the involvement of all stakeholders in the prevention and fight against corruption. Malaysia has established the Anti-Corruption Advisory Board, the Special Committee on Corruption, the Complaints Committee, the Operations Review Panel, and the Consultation and Corruption Prevention Panel aimed at ensuring the Malaysian Anti-Corruption Commission's transparency and integrity in the carrying out of its duties. Malaysia is also happy to report that the United Nations Office on Drug and Crimes had commended Malaysia's efforts in implementing UNCAC, and the report highlighted certain best practices that could be shared with other countries. Malaysia looks forward to sharing further information with ALCO member states on Malaysia's efforts in implementing its enhanced domestic anti-corruption legal framework in line with the ANCAC during the course of the discussions on this important agenda item. Malaysia continues to dedicate its efforts towards a tangible outcome of discussions on the Palestinian issue. I would like to reiterate my statement during the 51st annual session that if we wish to retain this topic in the agenda of our annual sessions, it is suggested that we stop making rhetorical statements and come up with concrete plans to move the discussion forward. Otherwise, it will be a waste of time. Malaysia continues to call upon the Security Council to act decisively under Chapter 7 of the Charter of the United Nations to enforce its numerous decisions over the past 6 decades. In November 2012, yet another military attack, Operation Pillar of Defense, was launched by Israel. Again, no tangible action was taken against these continued grave violations and severe breaches of international humanitarian law by Israel against the Palestinian people. In manifesting its unwavering support for the Palestinian people and condemning the brutal and aggressive attack by Israel through Operation Pillar of Defense, the Malaysian Parliament had unanimously passed a motion on the 20th of November 2012 to urge the Security Council to compel Israel to immediately cease its military attacks on the Palestinian territory of Gaza through a ceasefire and to decide to deploy a United Nations peacekeeping force to ensure the ceasefire. The Malaysian Parliament also called for the full withdrawal of Israel and the withdrawal of Israel from the Palestinian territory of Gaza and West Bank. Malaysia has consistently urged ALCO member states to reconsider their approach on the Palestinian issue. Malaysia cannot emphasize enough the importance of a legalistic outlook in the debate, particularly one that would focus on the elements of determination of the state of Palestine under the Montevideo Convention and the question as to who or which body can determine Palestinian statehood. Malaysia welcomes the special study on the statehood of Palestine under international law conducted by the Secretariat pursuant to the mandate which was initiated by Malaysia at the 51st annual session. We look forward to the release of the publication by the Secretary General in the next agenda of this meeting. This important study can form the basis for a more thorough legal research on the Palestinian issue, the outcome of which will be able to facilitate member states' deliberations during forthcoming ALCO sessions. Any conclusions or findings from such comprehensive legal research and deliberations can then be advanced as ALCO's view for purposes of the ongoing discussions on Palestinian at the United Nations or intra-regional level. Madam President and distinguished delegates, in the most recent development, the ILC at its 64th session in 2012 decided to include the topic of formation and evidence of customary international law in its program of work on the basis of the recommendation of the Working Group on the Long-Term Program of Work. Malaysia is of the view that progress in elaboration of new draft articles on this topic is perhaps long overdue, given the importance of customary international law and the need for it to be accorded the same recognition by the whole of the international community. Views as to what constitutes customary international law are manifestly decimated and deeply deliberated upon, although customary international law has long been recognized as a source of law. Malaysia therefore agrees with the Secretariat that an in-depth study should be conducted in relation to determining the formation and evidence of customary international law by taking into consideration views from all the different states. With regard to the topic of immunity of state officials from foreign criminal jurisdiction, Malaysia maintains the view that the topic should focus on the immunities accorded under international law, in particular customary international law, and not under domestic law. There is also no necessity to re-examine previously codified areas such as the immunities of diplomatic agents, consular officials, members of special missions, and representatives of states to international organizations. These categories of persons should be excluded from any definition of state officials for the purpose of ILC study. Malaysia notes that the Special Rapporteur proposes to devote her third report, which will be submitted to the Commission at its 66th session, to a study of the normative elements of immunity ration materia, focusing primarily on two complex issues, namely the terms official and official act. Malaysia looks forward to this report, particularly the draft articles on these issues and consequently the issue of exceptions to immunity. Due to the complexity of the matter, Malaysia welcomes any further guidance from ALCO member states to enable Malaysia to study the topic in greater detail and depth. Malaysia takes notes of the latest developments relating to the topic of protection of persons in the event of disasters, whereby the ILC at its 65th session in 2013 has now provisionally adopted draft Articles 5 and 16 as coming out of the work of the Commission's drafting committee. Malaysia further notes the observations made by the ALCO Secretariat on this topic, with particular reference to paragraph 132 of the Secretary General's report and matters relating to the work of the International Law Commission at its 64th and 65th session. Malaysia is of the view that the ALCO Secretariat should not only focus its observations and report on the previous sessions of the International Law Commission, but more importantly, ALCO should be focusing its report on the latest developments in the work of the Commission, and in this case, the proposed draft Articles of 16 and 5 term. During the 51st session, Malaysia had highlighted the significance of a treaty on mutual legal assistance as a tool for combating transnational crimes, including terrorism. Within the context of Southeast Asia, Malaysia and its ASEAN counterparts benefit from the cooperative framework of the Treaty on Mutual Legal Assistance in Criminal Matters among like-minded ASEAN member countries. Malaysia would like to reiterate its view that an intra-regional Asian-African legal instrument on the same matter would be beneficial, as among others, such an instrument can facilitate the implementation of a harmonized mutual assistance in criminal matters regime among ALCO member states from both the common law and civil law systems. Malaysia proposed that ALCO takes lead on this most urgent matter as determined. Recalling the decision of the 49th ALCO annual session, via resolution ALCO RES/49/S8, Malaysia looks forward to the establishment of an open-ended committee of experts to conduct a study on ways and means to enhance mutual legal assistance in criminal matters among ALCO member states in the near future. For the purposes of this study, Malaysia is prepared to share its knowledge and experience on the elaboration and conclusion of an ALCO MLAT. Madam President and distinguished delegates, Malaysia thanks the Honorable Secretary General and the Secretariat for their efforts in preparing the report of the Secretary General on the work of the ASEAN African Legal Consultative Organization, ORG-1, and the ALCO's financial report and proposed budget for the year 2014-02. Madam President and distinguished delegates, allow me, on behalf of the Government of Malaysia, and on a very personal note, I would like to place on record our most sincere condolences to the family of the late Ambassador Professor Chusei Yamada. The late Ambassador Professor Yamada has inspired me and my delegation to contribute effectively towards ALCO agenda